Hello, LTR SBG team fans and Middle Earth SBG Wargamers. We're here with our next episode of Battle Class, and this is going to be our first season, Season 1, how a game plays out. And today's video will be focused on the shooting phase. Joining me is going to be our channel host, our Battle Class host, I should say. It is going to be Joe, Sam, Jason, myself, Dan, Rainier, and Derek. So we're going to be talking over the shooting phase, and let's go ahead and let Rainier take the floor.
All right, guys. Hey, so I guess we're going to talk about the shooting phase in this section of Battle Class. Shooting is a very interesting part of the game because shooting is one of the only times that allows you to basically punch the opponent and not get punched in reply. Though sometimes you do get punched by their arrows as well. I think some of the main things that I do when it comes to shooting is I first I see what army my opponent has. Do they have heavy shooting as well? Do they not have heavy shooting? If they don't, that's good. If they do, you got to keep that in mind. Um, and then soft targets as well. A lot of times in shooting in SBG, it's not a big, I'm going to kill half of your army with shooting. It's more you're going to pick a couple weak points and take them out. So sometimes it means dehorsing a hero or taking out low armor troops or stuff like that. So yeah, I usually have heavy shooting armies, and that's usually what I do. I just take out the soft targets, I try to dehorse heroes, and I try to lower my opponent's troops as much as possible before combat comes. And yeah, I might have more to say a little later, but I guess I'll let Jason take a little bit from here.
Hey guys, so shooting, yeah, I'm not a big shooter. If you've watched our battle reports, if you haven't, please go do. I usually take 8 or 9 bow shots a turn for a game in my armies. So I've actually played against Rainier, and he had what'd you have, Rainier, like a 50-something model army, and you had like 20 crossbow shots coming at me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, shooting, it's more usually setting myself up not to get shot. Um, but the biggest thing I look at is even with my 8 or 9 bow shots, what am I going to try and realistically achieve with it? Am I going to use it to, if I'm fighting a lower defense army, try and pick off a few guys because they're more hardy, or if it's a lower model count army, do I use it to threaten an opponent's heroes, like Rainier said, by taking them off their horses? Or even something like say a Nazgul on a Felbeast, maybe take a wound or two off on a Felbeast. I actually had a game recently where I actually had quite a few bow shots, and I shot every single one of them at a Gundabat Ogre, and I didn't kill it, but I did 2 wounds, and then in the subsequent turn, I came around and charged it with a throwing spear, which is also a shooting attack, and killed it with that. So I never even had to engage that ogre in combat because I used my shooting in such a way. So for me, my big thing is, like I said, what am I going to use it for? Is it reality versus is it as a threat, or is it really just something that you use to try and take away something? But yeah, that's my thoughts on shooting. Who's next?
For me, I'm a lot like Jason. I'm not a big shooter. I take dwarves, so there's not a whole lot of shooting. I mean, unless you want to learn the ballista with some anti-shooting, but yeah, I mostly just try to avoid getting shot. I try and make sure I know where their archers are, my opponent's archers, and place my guys accordingly to avoid their shots. And of course, you always want to make sure you don't make rookie mistakes like completely blocking your shots with your own guys, or having too many in the ways for any possible shots you may have. that's about it for me. Joe?
Yeah, so shooting is actually a really good turn for me. Turn that I like to utilize. Several of the armies I take are pretty shooting heavy. Like my hobbits or my Rohan. Um, the thing about it is you want to look at key targets. So if you have heroes on horses, try to take out their horses is always something I like to go for. Um, like so. I think it's be good to talk about the different bow types too. Um, like specific armies tend to have better shooting than others in different ways. Like for instance, Isengard or Corsairs have crossbows, which hit harder. They're a little less accurate. Um, elves have elven bows. Men have just bows. But I think it's been said before. One of the things about shooting is you want to make your opponent come to you. So that's normally how I play, because with Rohan, I normally don't want to sally forth towards my opponent, and hobbits don't really want to engage right away. So I use my shooting to make my opponents worry enough to want to come and try and get in combat. Um, and if you're facing a bow heavy army, and I can attest, I've versed some of the shootiest of armies, like Haradrim army, and when you start losing models to shooting, and there have been times where even against Jason, we had a game where he was playing Arnor with a lot of rangers, and he killed um, uh, probably half my army, including horses, in shooting because I was trying to outshoot him, and I was too stubborn to move towards him, and then he ended up decimating my army. The same thing happened at Nova versus Seth Hinder, and he had almost an identical army to what Jason had, and he outshot me, and I was too stubborn to realize that I needed to go ahead and move towards him, and I got decimated in that fashion as well. But yeah, it's just if you're getting shot at and your army's getting decimated, or if you lose some key pieces. So, for instance, if I'm fighting dwarves, Durin's folk, I'll target Iron Guard because they're the easiest ones to kill, and because they're the some of the hardest hitters. So if I was the one playing Durin's folk, I probably wouldn't worry. I mean, I wouldn't get like flustered. I'd move towards him, but I wouldn't let the losses get to you. I think that's one of the things you gotta learn, is because if you start losing some key pieces in shooting, you're gonna start getting frantic and making mistakes, and that's something that doesn't need to happen. Dan,
Hey,
thoughts?
yeah. So I have a couple thoughts on this. So I think first off, the way that I look at shooting is definitely a tool that is I would say a useful tool to have. So every army that you build has certain tools in it, whether it be magic, banners, heroes. So every army has different tools that you can use in different games, and so bowfire is definitely a tool that a useful tool that you can have. I normally don't take a lot of shots with my Gondor, but with other armies, I definitely am going to be maxing out my bow shots. More on that later. But so my biggest thing with my bow fire for Gondor is most of the time I don't even use my bow shots. I have them just in case I can. Um, but like we just went to Historicon and I versed a Angmar army who had no bow fire, had a very scary close combat force, and so I was able to spend a couple turns shooting at him and killing some orcs and doing wounds to his I believe it was his Barrow White or something, and kind of start weakening his force before combat even hit. Um, so it was just having those tools that you can use, and one thing about shooting is you have to I think pick very useful target priorities. So like Rainier said earlier, I like to aim for my heroes' horses, even though it's a dirty thing to do. but it's something useful. Um, so I like to aim for my hero's horses, and then other big scary things that need to be softened up before close combat meets, so it's easier to take them out. Thoughts?
Oh no, I chime in for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because after hearing a lot of what you guys have saying, I see a difference in, I guess, groups play styles, whereas you guys aren't that heavy in North Carolina with bow firing troops. I feel like in the Pennsylvania group, the majority of us try to max out as much as possible with bows. And in most of the games that I've had at tournaments and other people in our groups have had at tournaments, I want to kind of piggyback on what Joe was saying earlier is when you're playing against a heavy bowfire army, don't freak out if you start losing a ton of models. The biggest rookie mistake is if someone, once they start losing a lot of models, they freak out when in their initial charge and they'll pull back and they'll realize, oh shoot, I still have to attack. So then they attack again and they waste a couple turns just getting shot up. Your opponent, if they are heavy in the bow fire, they're paying a lot of points for those bows, and those bows typically won't work once combat hits. So just if you're new and you're coming across a whole bunch of bow fire, just realize, oh, if I lose a 6, 7, 8 guys before combat ever hits, like that's fine. Don't make the mistake of charging in sections. Just go full out. Thoughts?
Yeah, good thing you mentioned that right here. Something I actually liked was you said it best. Each group kind of plays differently. PA, I have noticed that since we came to your event. You guys do have a lot of more bowfire.
Yeah.
And down here in Carolina, we usually play more thematic, and we don't really max out on bowfire. Some do, like Joe does with his hobbits, and then even Rohan Force. The Arnor list that he mentioned earlier had a lot of bowfire. But I agree with you, Rainier. Don't freak out. Bows are there. Your shooting's there as a threat, and it's also there to threaten you. So remember, best laid plans go to waste as soon as combat starts. And that game that I mentioned earlier against Rainier, where he had a bunch of arbalesters, he shot all my heroes except for one off their horses. But I stuck with it, and I kept. I think I kept a pretty good line against his strength 4 crossbows with a defense 7 shield wall ministerial warriors. And even though he didn't take out a lot of my guys, he took my heroes off. Still, when I got in combat, your heroes are still good even if they're on their feet. Are they as good? No, but you're also forcing your opponent to waste some of those bow shots. So when you take a hero on horse, it's a big, fat, juicy target. It's almost got a neon flashing sign saying me, shoot at me." And when that happens, don't go, oh crap. Just accept it. If they get shot off their horse, okay, move on, adjust, adapt, and overcome. I like how some of the newer profiles, Rohan getting horse lords definitely helps. You have to be careful with that because you don't want to blow all your fate on a 50-50 chance to keep a horse alive. But if you're one turn away from combats and it's like, okay, well, I need to keep my horse alive because my hero's about to charge in on the next turn and give me a big advantage, it might be something you want to look at. But yeah, that's my thoughts. Anybody else? I think Dan, you have something.
Yeah, I got a couple thoughts. So first off, I have to agree with both Jason and Rainier. I've versed a lot of during my the course of my career. I've versed a lot of different armies with a lot of bows, and so I think one important thing to think about here is, and this is kind of harkening back to the movement phase, is if you're versing somebody with a lot of bow fire, you know, see whether or not the bow fire is dispersed through the war bands. Quite a few people actually don't take both. They take like one big block of archers or like a gun line of Corsair Reavers or whatever. Or I don't think it's Reavers, whatever they are, the bow guys, the crossbow guys.
Abalisters.
Yeah, and I've seen like there's a couple of times they take like all 12 or whatever in a war band and just have a huge gun line. So if they do that, like use terrain and stuff and movement so that you pretty much avoid that section. I've done that a couple times. I've versed the Corsairs specifically at forwards, and pretty much he didn't even get any shots off because I deployed my army on the. He deployed his bows first, and then I deployed my army on the other side where there was a big house in the middle of the board. He didn't even get any shots off, so that was quite a big investment that wasn't able to do anything. Another thing to think about is use heroic marches and stuff to march up and mitigate some shooting turns that they might have on you otherwise. Thoughts?
Yeah, so I actually have a few thoughts. So I was gonna say there are a few tools you can. So let's say you have a shooting heavy army. Or even if you don't have a shooting heavy army, there's a few tools you can actually put into your army to kind of default outshoot your opponent. One of them being is a wizard. So if you want to take Gandalf the Grey or Galadriel, who have an ability called Blinding Light, you can call Blinding Light, and anyone shooting within 6 inches of your wizard has to shoot on a six. That's a really good way to. So let's say you have Lake Town with Gandalf in it, or hobbits, or whoever, versus Corsairs or Harad or elves even. let's say their elf army doesn't have Galadriel in it. By you calling Blinding Light, I think you're automatically giving yourself an edge in shooting. And then another tool you can use to negate bowfire specifically is siege engines, which we haven't covered much. Sam briefly did. I took a taken one, and it literally was the workhorse of that army. It made every game I had. It made my opponent come to me. I had Legolas and Thranduil. Those were the only two guys on my list who had bows. And having a siege engine doesn't just make your opponent worry about getting smashed. It also makes them stagger their army. So when they get to you, their army is staggered, and you can kind of piecemeal the stragglers. And if you verse a shooting heavy army with a siege engine, you can use it to target their archers. Another thing I don't think we've covered yet is something called shooting lanes. So when you're setting up, when you're in your movement phase, you want to move your archers and position them into really good lanes of fire. So back alleys, things like that, where you got pure line of sight and you got some juicy targets. We call those shooting lanes, and I like setting up shooting lanes to get really good shots off. That's all I got. So thoughts?
Rainier, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. I have a couple more. I agree a lot with what Joe was saying. A lot of times people try to mitigate bow's damaging what bow does to damage you, but what Joe kind of said is you can take tools that just about negate bow fire completely, like blinding light, the dwarf siege ballista. You could also bring a Mordor catapult that has a further range than bows. And sometimes when you come across a heavy bowfire army, if you have a catapult that fires like 48 inches, it'll freak the opponent out, and they'll wind up coming to you. One another big thing too that I wanna hop on what Jason was talking about is saving your hero's horses. So it doesn't mean you have to hide your hero, but it does mean you want to create as many in the ways as possible to where it's not so easy for an opponent to shoot your hero's horse out, or even say wound your hero or something, wound your leader or something like that. And I think one more thing too that I've come across, because I usually typically I've been trying not to do it as much in tournaments, but usually I bring as many bows as possible just because it's really fun to shoot. It's my Tennessee roots, just want to shoot stuff. But when you come across someone with that you have heavy bow fire, they have heavy bow fire, sometimes you need to know when to cut loose and when to stop shooting. This could mean you have some elf bows, say 10 elf bows with defense 3, and you come across someone that has 10 abalisters at defense 6 and shooting. Yeah, you're going to hit them more, but realistically, your elf bows, they're going to be slaughtered by the abalisters and the crossbows that are shooting back at you. So in a way, know when to cut loose. Know in 1 or 2 turns, this warband's going to be obliterated by shooting fire. Your opponent's going to win the shooting game. So just know when to cut loose and just engage your guys. Those are kind of, I guess, a couple things that came off my head that piggyback on what other people are saying. All right, anyone else?
Yeah, I'm gonna jump on a lot of folks' points, but I'm gonna try and make it quick. So Joe started with siege weapons. Those are becoming more and more prevalent. I've noticed. So you need to know about them. If you're not familiar with them, even if you're a new player and you're not familiar with them, go read up on them. I'm seeing a lot of those, and Joe said they can really be a workhorse for you. We actually, on our way back from Pennsylvania from the event that Rainier hosted, we were talking a lot about it, how to combat them, how to use them ourselves. And one of the big things that they do that Joe touched on is positioning. They force you to move your army. So you can counter those, like you said, with blinding light. Another thing, and with the new rules, now that you can only call certain heroics, you really need to look at your army builds, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But one of the big heroics, especially to help counter shooting, is heroic marches. If you don't have heroic march and your opponent is a archer heavy army, like when I played against Rainier, it can really hurt you because you're trying to get up there, but you can't get there any faster than 6 inches. So having or less if you're playing dwarfs. So if you have March, that can help counter it. But yeah, definitely familiarize yourself with siege weapons, and those are becoming much more prevalent. I think that's me. Sam, Dan, one of you guys is next.
Yeah, I got quite a few thoughts here. I just wanted to touch up on something that Rainier said. So I normally, if I can take a hero mounted, then I always do take a hero mounted. I also normally take, if I can take cavalry, I normally do as well. So getting my horses shot out has always been a lovely experience I always seem to encounter in all my games. So I've developed some ways to try to avoid getting my heroes specifically shot off their horses. And so Rainier had a good point with creating in the ways. So I normally normally have two the shield guy in the front and then the spear guy in the back. Normally I have those guys in front of my heroes, and then I have different lanes of movement I can use to charge. But I normally have my heroes behind my battle line to help avoid them being an open target. Also, I've done this against Derek a couple times when he had a very heavy bowfire army. I did something I call the Congo line technique, and I took a line of guys, like 6 guys, and put them in a vertical line, and then put my hero at the end of that line. So he had to go through 6 in the ways to shoot my heroes, and that's something you do if you have the option. Like if you have the option to do that, and you really don't want to lose your hero, that's something you can do. And generally, strength 2 is wounding, which is a very large number of bows, is wounding you on 6s. So you have a pretty good survival rate on that. Thoughts?
Yeah, so Rainer touched on this in terms of when you. So if I have me personally, I tend to take bow heavy armies, just the way the armies are. I think that when you need to stop shooting, so specifically this is on objective games. I actually made a list of objective games I think shooting is really good in. I think Lords of Battle is probably the best scenario for shooting, especially if you have a shooting based army. There's no need for you to move forward. You could just sit there and shoot and make your opponent come to you. That's what we were talking about earlier. I do think Maelstrom specifically hold ground is a really good shooting scenario. And Lords of Battle, or sorry, Domination. But Domination, I would say there actually is a point in time where you need to stop shooting and focus on the objectives. I personally have made the mistake where normally when I play my L's, I do this. I deploy back, I shoot, I shoot, I shoot. My opponent is literally in my face and has control of the entire board. And I just gave him all the objectives, and I lose. So it's important to realize when you need to stop shooting, and when you need to go for the objectives. A scenario like Lords of Battle or to the death is a great for a shooting army because you don't have to worry about that. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, if I could add a story that kind of just verifies what Joe was saying. At the last Forge, we had someone in our group bring a pure Mirkwood Ranger army, and it was just all Mirkwood Rangers with Legolas, Thranduil, and I think Tariel. So something like 30, 34, 35 elf shots. And it was an objective based scenario. And it was 30 minutes. I think it was the game that I played you, Jason. It was 30 minutes into that game. And I look over and I'm like, hey, how's the game going? And he's like, I killed him too fast. And what happened was he killed his opponent so fast by shooting him and just castling, basically, which castling means you just set up your situation, just shoot away defensively. And the opponent had grabbed the objective, so he wound up slaughtering his opponent, but his opponent won the game because he just wasn't playing the objectives right. So I guess that echoes Joe's point of don't just castle with your archers. Send them sometimes to go get objectives. Do something what I consider it's called suppressing fire. So if you have a warband of archers, shoot half of them and move forward half, and then the next turn move forward the next half and shoot the other half, and just kind of be in a motion of the game's continuing, and you have to be at a certain place getting objectives at a certain time. But one thing that I want to also add before I forget is shooting into combats. Evil players have the ability to shoot into combats, which is really nice. And people a lot of times assume that this is to shoot to wound your opponent. But what I like doing when I shoot into combats is I enjoy negating my opponent's resources. So this came up when I played Jason. Jason, you'll probably remember this with all my Corsairs. I would feed Boromir, who has 6 might. I would feed him 1 Corsair warrior. And I'd be like, okay, he's obviously going to heroic combat, kill this Corsair warrior, and like slaughter a whole bunch of other people. So I'd feed him this Corsair warrior, and then I'd have my Abalisters, and I'd shoot into combat, not hoping to wound Boromir, or, well, if I wounded Boromir, yay for that, but more so hoping to kill my own guy so he can't heroic combat and get more movement. So for evil armies, keep that in mind when you shoot into combat. Use it selectively, and use it kind of evilly in a way. I mean, it's pretty themed to do it that way, but shoot your own guys to kind of negate heroes from heroic combating and getting the jump on your heroes or getting the jump on your troops. But yeah, that's all I have for now.
Yes, Rainier, you were very, very dirty in that, and I do remember. I
You have
remember that.
nightmares, I have dreams.
Yeah, I do remember that it only worked though, so I was happy for that. But yeah, Rainier's right. That's definitely something with an evil army. Good can't shoot into combat except for one person who can, Legolas, because of his insta shot. I'll let somebody else who played Legolas cover that. But yeah, if you're evil, definitely remember you can shoot. And a lot of times, as a good player like myself, I will set myself up in a position where if I have a big hero who I'm going to try and, what do you call slingshot it, basically. Slingshotting is charging a hero into one minor weak warrior that you have a very good chance of beating, and then doing a heroic to slingshot, aka throw them around into another combat against an enemy hero and something big like a monster or something of that nature. so that he can come around and do some damage. So doing a heroic, not a heroic, sorry, being evil, because remember, evil is the only one who can shoot into combat. Being evil and shooting into combat and stealing that really can throw a monkey wrench in some of these plans. So yeah, and the funny part about that was Rainier. Boromir is one of the guys who got shot off his horse, like I said earlier, by Rainier, and Boromir was holding up the one flank. So I was trying to do heroic combats to go chase these guys down in the domination scenario as well. And him doing that stole my ability to chase down his guys and have a good chance of killing him because Boromir's he's a beast in combat. But my one last point I want to talk about, and I'll try and keep it quick, is positioning your own shooting. Positioning is big because this goes back to our first episodes about deployment. When you deploy, in my opinion, you don't want to put all your archers in band because the scenario, like Joe said, maelstrom scenarios, if your archers come in and then they get flanked, you're paying for those bows, which means you usually don't have a higher defense. You usually only are defense 5 unless you're a dwarf, which defense 6 guys, but you usually defense 5, defense 4. So they have a much higher chance of getting surrounded and killed really easily. So be careful with how you build your army. Disperse your bows about. That way, in a scenario like that, where if you have one warband that comes in on the opposite side for a maelstrom, they're not going to be easy cannon fodder for being killed in combat. They're actually going to be able to stand a chance because you'll have regular sword and board guys in there. And then you'll have your shooting dispersed, which means you will still have the ability to threaten with your shooting on other points of the board. And then positioning, again, when you move yourself, you have to be able to set yourself up so that you can shoot at your opponent, but also not leave yourself where your big heroes can be shot at. Like Dan said, he sets his guys up in the back, and then as he moves forward, he'll slowly matriculate his heroes either somewhere in the middle where he can run up his cavalry about, or around the outside, so that they're not getting pinned in the back behind a too deep shield wall. One story, and this will be it for me. I know I'm rambling. I apologize. I think I may have covered this already in another one, but I played against Austin from the Tennessee group, and it was our first time playing each other at the Nashville event last year. And he had the Dead of Donharo with Aragorn leading it, and he did a march with Aragorn and marched up. We were playing Seize the Prize, and he marched up to grab the objective. Well, I didn't have march, so I didn't counter it. There was no reason for me to do heroic movement or anything. He got up there, but what he didn't do was protect Aragorn. He left him behind a couple ranks of guys, but he didn't bubble wrap him completely. And that was a mistake because then on my shooting phase, I had Doom here with Blackroot Vale archers, and they combo each other really well. If they don't move and they take part in a heroic shoot, they get to re-roll ones to hit and re-roll failed wounds. So I shot 12 shots at Aragorn, who's defense 7, which is good. And so I need 6s by 4s, but I got 3 wounds. And he ended up taking a wound because he failed 2 of his 3 fate, I believe, which gave me an easy VP right there. So yeah, be careful with your positioning. And then very last point, know your bows. Joe said it. There's a lot of different bows out there. You've got crossbows that are strength 4. You've got strength 2 bows for men, strength 3 bows with elven shooting, and then you even have the great bow, I believe it is, with bard, which is a strength 4. So that's it for me, guys. I think I've talked enough on this. Dan, I believe you have something. Go for it, buddy.
Yeah, I think I wanted to go back to what Rainier and you actually both said about evil shooting. I just wanted to point out that a lot of times the ability to shoot into your own combats is actually really, I would say, is an advantage. There's been quite a few times where I've had my plans foiled by somebody shooting into the combat and killing their own guys. So especially with somebody like Lurz and Vrasku, who have might and stuff, they could really mess you up. Also, I guess heroic accuracy affects those. So, okay, I shoot my opponent. Is that in the way? Hey, is that? I think that is it
It
because
is.
they're in the way. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
So you could re-roll in the hopes to hit your own guy. So it's just something interesting to think about. Thoughts?
Yeah, I actually have a few thoughts left. And then that'll probably be it for me. So one I'm going to talk about is archer units. Normally, not always, but normally, um, are actually pretty the weakest troop in the army. So when you're moving and all that, keep that in mind. That when you get into combat, and we'll cover that in the next segment, the archer units tend to be pretty weak. Now there are exceptions like crossbow Urukai or still Urukai and Watchers of Karna used to be great fighters as well, but not always. It's not always the case, but for the most part it is. But what I want to talk about is bow limit and heroes with bows, and then that'll be it for me. Um, so bow limit is a built-in natural thing where your army only 1/3 of your army can have bows. Now there are a few armies that negate this or have their own special. Thranduil's Halls has 100% bow limit with the Mirkwood Rangers, Rivendell Knights, things of that nature. We won't go too much into that. So keep that in mind when you're building your list. That only 1/3 of your army can take bows. Maxing them out is your choice. Dan doesn't. Other players don't. I like to take a lot of bow shots personally. And then heroes with bows. So this is one thing that I don't think we've covered yet. So heroes like Bard and Legolas and Haldir and Vrasku are all heroes that have bows, and they have special rules where they can shoot more than once, which is great. I love Vrasku. I loved using Vrasku. I haven't played him in a while, but having a strength 4 shot that can shoot twice a turn with 3 might backing it up, it goes for really cool things you can do to shoot into a combat, use a might to kill a guy, use a might to kill a hero or a troll or whatever. The name of the rule, by the way, is expert shot. But actually, the hero I'm gonna talk about, because he's actually my favorite character, is in all of Lord of the Rings, is Legolas. I used to take Legolas back in the day, and I didn't know he was good at the time. And then I started playing around with his rule. I'm like, man, he's really good. Legolas is probably, bar none, the best shooter hero in the game. He has the elf bow. He can shoot 3 times a turn. And then here's his rule, he has a shot that he can do instead of shooting 3 times, where he can shoot one single shot, negates in the ways, and instantly wounds if it hits. Now in the new edition, you have to roll a die on a 2+ to see if it goes off, but it's still, it's a 2+, so it probably will. And that rule is really good at killing banner bears. That's the thing I don't think we talked about, is actually I like to use my bow shots to aim for banner bears. Killing banner bears, you can instantly shoot heroes' horses. You can instantly shoot. I like using my shooting his insta shot to kill guys that are on objectives, specifically for domination. You can shoot into combat. So there's a lot of things you can do with Legolas. If you want to take a really good shooting hero, Legolas. I think second would be Bard, just because he has the great bow and he can shoot 3 times as well, but he's not guaranteed the 3 shots. I think that's all my points, guys. So that's it for me.
All right, guys. Any more thoughts before we wrap it up? All right. Well, I guess that will conclude our shooting video. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment below. And stay tuned for our next episode, which will be combats. And, of course, enjoy your Middle Earth hobby. All right, guys. Take care.